After the Cold War ended, the United States slashed its defense budget by more than 15%. Naturally, the arms industry was severely affected. It resulted in an orgy of mergers and acquisitions. Some of the big arms conglomerates today are made up of what 10 years ago would have been 20 or more smaller arms companies. Armstech is one of those. But we lost our bid to produce the U.S. Air Force's next line of fighter jets. Then we took a stab at civilian applications, but that was a failure too. The company was about to go belly up. Ironically, the Defense Department was in pretty much the same situation. Thanks to big budget cuts, they were forced to turn to the private sector to help fund their weapons development. On top of that, the government began to actively export their advanced weapons technology to the private sector in order to maintain a high standard of quality in the country's defense armaments. Eventually, they decided on a joint development project for new weapon systems between the DoD and the private sector. And since both sides were in such bad financial shape, that's where all the back-scratching came in. So there was another reason for the joint development of Metal Gear, huh? It wasn't just President Baker trying to keep arms tech afloat.
The theory of nuclear deterrence was born during the Cold War, at a time of great suspicion between the U.S. and the USSR. The great gulf between the ideologies of East and West caused a dramatic escalation in the arms race. And this escalation of the arms race in turn fueled mutual distrust and fear between the world's two great superpowers. The last half of the 20th century was shaped by the policy of nuclear deterrence. But the world has changed. The Cold War has ended, and we are now living in a world where small regional conflicts are breaking out all over. Things are not so simple anymore, and the policy of nuclear deterrence is obsolete. Most of these regional conflicts are the result of age-old enmities between different ethnic groups and religions. In those cases, the hatred often runs so deep that rationality is thrown out the window. For people such as them, the fear of a counterstrike often means lethal, and that is why the nuclear deterrence policy has lost much of its efficacy. A nuclear standoff is not a sufficient deterrent in the current world climate.
A native Alaskan American, huh? Probably Athapascan. They're originally from the same tribe as the Apaches and Navajos of New Mexico. Anthropologically, they're related to the Japanese. There are even linguistic similarities between Athapascan languages and ancient Japanese. You and he probably share many of the same ancestors.
Master, I don't remember telling you that I was part Japanese.
That is amazing. Dr. Emmerich's father participated in the Manhattan Project? That was the secret World War II project responsible for the creation of the first atomic bomb. It had a huge budget, something like $2 billion. They brought in 120,000 of the best and brightest scientists and engineers to work on it. And we all know how that story ended. In July of 1945, they exploded the first nuclear device at Trinity, followed shortly after by Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Trinity. The world was changed forever that day. Scientists and researchers could no longer pretend that their hands were clean of blood. Afterwards, the leader of the Manhattan Project, J. Robert Oppenheimer, said, "The physicists have known sin, and this is a knowledge which they cannot lose." The IAEA was established in 1957 to oversee peaceful as well as military applications of atomic power. But the IAEA can only investigate those countries which request an investigation. Furthermore, the timing of the inspection must be approved by the country in question. They are not allowed to do sneak inspections. The country that is being investigated can even dictate the nationality of the inspectors that they will allow in. In the late 1970s, Iraq would only allow inspectors from Bulgaria and Russia to enter the country. The IAEA does not even have the authority to level fines against countries who have committed infractions. After the Gulf War, they discovered that Iraq had been developing nuclear weapons in secret right under the investigators' noses. Unfortunately, as an organization, the IAEA just did not have the teeth to effectively stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons and technology. Scientists are currently using gene therapy to try and create a microorganism capable of breaking down plutonium, but they have not yet had any success.
The plutonium version of bioremediation, huh? Instead of processing, what about reusing it? I thought that they were working on using dismantled plutonium for civilian applications.
For a time, it looked like there was going to be international cooperation for that. But unfortunately, there was too much mutual suspicion and it all fell apart.
Well, I found lots of information about that new nuclear weapon. There are 4 stages involved in launching a ballistic missile. The first one is the boost stage. It starts at the point the missile is launched and ends after all the rocket fuel is burned and the missile is propelled into the exosphere. The next stage is the post-boost stage. It starts after all the fuel is burned and ends after the re-entry vehicle is ejected. Next is the intermediate course stage. It takes place after the re-entry vehicle is ejected and lasts until the missile enters the exosphere. Then comes the final stage. It starts when the re-entry vehicle enters the exosphere, and it lasts until it reaches its ultimate target on the ground. Missile defense systems use military satellites to detect rocket emissions during the initial boost stage of a missile. But this new nuclear weapon employs the railgun's ability to fire projectiles at ultra-high velocities instead of using a rocket. That's why it can't be detected by today's missile defense systems. And on top of that, the re-entry vehicle also uses stealth technology. It's so accurate that its 50% zone comes close to 50 meters. That's as good as the best ICBM.
A highly accurate, undetectable, uninterceptable nuclear weapon. We wouldn't even be able to tell where it came from.
And that's not all. A standard ballistic missile uses a 2-stage or a 3-stage solid fuel rocket for its propulsion system. Besides costing lots of money, safely maintaining the solid rocket fuel and readying the missile for launch requires a lot of work. But a railgun-launched nuclear warhead avoids all of those problems. And it's cheap, too.
It's the perfect nuke. A general's dream.
And the world's nightmare.
Radome stands for Radar Dome. It is a cover, protecting a super-sensitive electronic scanning array. Almost all modern combat aircraft have them. It is not just a radar system in there. That radome probably contains infrared sensors, motion detectors, and other equipment too. It is like a combination of eyes, ears, and nose all rolled into one. If you could destroy that, you might have a chance.
Snake, Rex's armor is impregnable. You can't do any damage with the weapons you've got. Rex uses the latest advances in compound armor. The only way you can pierce it is with a high-performance heat round.
So what do I do?
Rex's pilot seat operates exactly like a VR system. It's got multiple sensors connected to a high-tech interface used for the controls. It's completely self-enclosed and shut off from the outside environment.
He's not using his naked eyes?
That's right. So if you could somehow destroy the sensors... Do you see that round plate on Rex's left arm?
Yeah, that thing that looks like a shield.
That's a radome. If you can destroy that thing, it won't be able to use its electronic equipment.
So he'll be blinded.
Yeah, try to hit that radome with a Stinger missile.
So that will stop it?
No. Rex was designed so it can be controlled manually, too.
Oh, great.
The part that looks like a beak is where the pilot seat is. In an emergency, it'll open up. Rex's armor is perfect. You can't destroy it.
You told me that already.
But the interior is a different story.
I get it. First I destroy the radome. That will force him to open up the pilot's seat.
Right. If you can shoot a Stinger missile into the cockpit, you'll destroy the computer control system.
You intentionally designed it with a weak point?
It's not a weak point. I like to think of it as a character flaw. People just aren't complete without some type of character flaw, don't you think?
I guess so. I owe you one, Otacon. Otacon said that now it's possible to design and test new types of nuclear weapons in a virtual simulation without ever exploding a nuclear device. Is that true?
Yes, it is true. Since the establishment of DART and NEAF early in the 21st century, there has been a wealth of data concerning nuclear fission and fusion. There is also much data accumulated from the nuclear tests conducted over the last 4 decades. With the processing speed of today's supercomputers, they can design a new nuclear weapon through virtual reality computer simulations.